I'm someone who says we have a problem with illegal migration. You cannot have a situation where boat after boat crosses the channel, leaving a perfectly safe country, France, and coming to another perfectly safe country, Britain. You just can't have that. And so you have to be creative and inventive, and that's what the Rwanda policy is.
And hand on heart, if this had come up when you were PM, would you have gone for this policy?
Well, we'd had a totally different situation because we had a situation where you could return people directly to France. Now, I'd love that situation to be the case again. That's the most sensible thing. People land on a beach in Kent, you take them straight back to France, you therefore break the model of the people's smugglers.
So shouldn't you be trying to get that?
Well, that's not available at the moment. It's simply not possible
at the
moment.
Because of Brexit?
Well, because of the situation we're in, because of the attitude of others and all the rest of it. It's not available at the moment.
Former Conservative Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron suggesting Britain can no longer return Channel migrants to France because of Brexit.
I'd love that situation to be the case again. That's the most sensible thing. People land on a beach in Kent, you take them straight back to France, you therefore break the model of the people's smugglers.
So shouldn't you be trying to get that?
Well, that's not available at the moment. It's simply not possible
Because of
at the moment.
Brexit?
This is what former Prime Minister Boris Johnson promised in 2019.
Yes, I can make sure that numbers will come down because we'll be able to control the system in that way. I don't think people in this country are hostile to immigration at all, let alone being hostile to immigrants, but they want it democratically controlled. And that's what Brexit allows us to do. That's why we need to get this thing through, which we can, before Christmas, and then come out on January the 31st.
And this is what happened.
This is net migration, the difference, as you all know by now, between people arriving and leaving the UK. For years it bumped along the bottom here. I say the bottom, 200 to 300,000 was still quite controversial. But look how it soared since we completed Brexit, almost touching 1 million at its peak.
The comments made by Lord Cameron chime with this from French President Emmanuel Macron.
This is my wish, but it depends on what we will do in the coming months and years. On the short run, what we have to do is to fix the consequences of the Brexit. A lot of issues we have are direct consequences of the Brexit, and probably some of these consequences were underestimated, but we have to fix them.
The former Foreign Secretary's comments also chime with a study by Durham University, which found the primary factor in the skyrocketing number of small boat crossings was the former Conservative government's decision to leave the European Union without a returns agreement in place. Here are some of the report's key findings. The primary factor behind small boat crossings is the UK's lacking a returns agreement with the EU. The government never assessed the impact of the consequences for leaving the EU without a returns agreement to replace the Dublin regulation and was caught by surprise. The UK did not need to leave this agreement in leaving the EU. Non-EU members have returns agreements with the EU. The lack of a returns agreement fueled an increase in crossings. A key factor is the withdrawal from a returns policy with the EU in 2020. Since 2016, the government has been warned repeatedly about the consequences of leaving the EU without a returns policy in place, including that it would fuel a large increase in irregular migration. It was asked several times to offer an assessment of the consequences, but it declined. The failure to acknowledge its past policy failure has impacted on its ability to fix it. After repeatedly denying the need to make any assessment of its oven-ready deal, the government appears unable to acknowledge that its failure to agree a returns agreement in this deal would have the consequences it has. This is because to address this failing is to recognise its earlier error, which may have political costs. And now Sky News has obtained some comments by Chris Philp, now the Shadow Home Secretary, who back in 2020 was the Immigration Minister, which appears to suggest that they believe when it came to asylum, there were flaws in the deal we had at the point we left the European Union. Let's hear what Chris Philp told a gathering of Tory members on Zoom just a few weeks ago at the end of April, when asked why isn't there a better deal we can strike with the European Union, with countries like France.
Now, because we're out of the European Union now, we are out of the Dublin III regulations, and so we can't any longer rely on sending people back to the place where they first claimed asylum. When we did check it out, just before we exited the EU transitional arrangements on December the 31st, 2020, we did run some checks and found that about half the people crossing the Channel had claimed asylum previously elsewhere in Europe, in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, somewhere like that, and therefore could have been returned. But now we're out of Dublin, we can't do that, and that's why we need to have somewhere like Rwanda that we can send these people to as a deterrent.
The Conservative Party willfully inflicted catastrophic damage on the country with their flagship Brexit policy before leaving office. Let's now make sure we hold them accountable for it by having a frank and honest discussion about the harm it's caused. In fact, the Labour government should be absolutely hammering them with this.